Government was established based on consent. Evidence in the Delaware Constitution Preamble. Through divine goodness, all people have by nature the rights of worshiping and serving their Creator according to the dictates of their consciences, of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring and protecting reputation and property, and in general of obtaining objects suitable to their condition, without injury by one to another, and as these rights are essential to their welfare, for due exercise thereof, power is inherent in them, meaning it belongs to them, and therefore all just authority in the institutions of political society is derived from the people and established with their consent, to advance their happiness, and they may, for this end, as circumstances require, from time to time, alter their constitution of government. This applies in every state. Evidence in the Nebraska Bill of Rights, Article 1, Section 1. All persons are by nature free and independent, and have certain inherent and inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the right to keep and bear arms for security or defense of self, family, home, and others, and for lawful common defense, hunting, recreational use, and all other lawful purposes. And such right shall not be denied or infringed by the state or any subdivision thereof. To secure these rights and the protection of property, governments are instituted among people, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And this applies to every state. Evidence in the South Dakota Bill of Rights, Article 6, Section 1. All men are born equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring and protecting property, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This applies in every state. Testimony from Ronald Reagan. He says, "We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around, and this makes us special among the nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted to it by the people. It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed." So what is consent? Consent means literally to think with another, hence to agree or accord. More generally, to agree in mind and will, to yield to what one has, the power, the right, or the disposition to withhold or refuse to grant. We generally use this word in cases where power, rights, and claims are concerned. We give consent when we yield that which we have a right to withhold. That's from the American Dictionary of the English Language, 1828. Looking closer. Agree definitions. Agree means to be of one mind, to harmonize in opinion in the expediency of the law. All the parties agree. To have in concord, or without contention. That's from the American Dictionary of the English Language, 1828. It also means to concur, come into harmony, give mutual assent, unite in mental action, exchange promises, make an agreement, arrange, to settle. That's from Black's Law, 5th edition. Accord definition. Accord means an accord being a contract, the requirements of mutual assent and consideration must be met. It's an agreement to accept, an extension of an obligation, something different from or less than that to which the person agreeing to accept is entitled. In practice, to agree or concur as one judge with another, in agreement with. That's from Black's Law, 5th edition. Assent definition. Assent means compliance, approval of something done, a declaration of willingness to do something in compliance with a request, acquiescence, agreement, to approve, ratify, and confirm. It implies a conscious approval of facts actually known, as distinguished from mere neglect to ascertain facts. Sometimes it is equivalent to authorize. That's from Black's Law, 5th edition. Putting it together, government is instituted and receives its power and authority from the consent of we the people. Consent is contingent upon compliance of government officials, a declaration of willingness to do something in compliance with a request, to give mutual assent, agreement, an exchange of promises. Consent creates a contract requiring the mutual assent and considerations to be met. When we the people give consent, we always have the right to withhold that consent. The consent of the governed, which are the elected officials, is required to enter into the contract or agreement. Testimony from Jonathan Swift. He says, "For in reason, all government without the consent of the governed is the very definition of slavery." Maxims of Law for Agreement. 5a. When there is a disagreement in the substance, it appears that there is no acceptance. 5b. An agreement induced by fraud cannot stand. 5d. Agreements give the law to the contract. These are Maxims of Law by Charles Wiseman. Maxims are fundamental principles of law. Maxims of Law for Consent. 21b. Consent makes the law. 21d. He who can will, exercise volition, has a right to refuse to will, to withhold consent. 21f. He who does not forbid what he can forbid seems to assent. 21k. He who consents cannot receive an injury. 21l. The silence of a party implies his consent when his interest is at stake. So if you send a notice to one of your congressmen and they do not reply, that means that he consents. Conversely, if your legislators or congressman does something that you do not agree with and you do not contact them and let them know, they take your silence as your consent. Maxims of Law for Contracts. 24f. A contract without consideration, or upon a false consideration, which fails, or upon unlawful consideration, cannot have any effect. 24k. The contract makes the law. 24q. Contracts receive legal sanction from the agreement of the parties. Contract maxims continued. 24t. The stipulations of parties constitute the law of the contract. 24w. Nothing is so natural as that an obligation should be dissolved by the same mode and principles in which it were contracted. Therefore, an obligation by words is taken away by words. An obligation of mere consent is dissolved by contrary consent. 24z. A contract cannot arise out of an act radically wrong and illegal. Meaning, a contract cannot be valid or legally binding unless consent is given. Both duress and undue influence can cause a contract to be voided. Each elected and appointed government official takes an oath of office, thereby creating a contract which shows mutual consent, agreement with the stated considerations to be met. We the people always hold the right to remove our consent. Misrepresentation definition. Misrepresentation means any manifestation by words or other conduct by one person to another that, under the circumstances, amounts to an assertion not in accordance with the facts, an untrue statement of fact, an incorrect or false representation, that which, if accepted, leads the mind to an apprehension of a condition other and different from that which exists. Definition continued. In a limited sense, An intentional false statement respecting a matter of fact made by one of the parties to a contract, which is material to the contract and influential in producing it. A misrepresentation, which justifies the rescission of a contract, is a false statement of a substantive fact or any conduct which leads to a belief of a substantive fact material to proper understanding of the matter in hand, made with intent to deceive or mislead. Summation. Consent from we the people was given to establish the American government to achieve specific purposes. Those sworn into government service enter into a contract with we the people based on the mutual agreement to fulfill those purposes. We the people retain the right to withdraw our consent from government contracts. When the contractual mutual assent is broken by noncompliance as well as misrepresentation, these actions justify a rescission, annulling of our contract, which is our consent. Are you ready to withdraw your consent? Tell your legislators they no longer have your consent. Testimony by Calvin Coolidge. He said, "If all men are created equal, that is final. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions." Testimony by Jefferson Davis. He said, "Governments rest on the consent of the governed, and that it is the right of the people to alter or abolish them at will whenever they become destructive of the ends for which they were established." Thank you for watching. Please click the like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share with others to help educate everyone. Thank you.